second part of that
Absolutely.
is cheap freight is relative, and to me, if you look at pre-pandemic, right, let's go back to 2019, 2020, and it's hard to believe it's been 3-4 years almost that we've been in this pandemic state. But if you remember that and you go back to your research, ATRI did their own research, which they do some good research in a broad scope. But if you look at the break-even points back then, we're about $1.65. We were seeing break-even points at $1.65, $1.70, right? So if I'm operating at $1.65, I bought a truck back in 2015, 2016. And like you said, I don't have the truck notes. I don't have those large overheads that a lot of folks experienced in the last couple of years, which were reflective of the inflationary tactics that were taking place during the pandemic.
Welcome to the ThinkFreight podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Werdine, and it's my pleasure to have Adam Wingfield. He's the founder of innovative logistics group, ILG. Adam, thanks for coming on the ThinkFreight podcast today.
Thanks for having me today, Thomas.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you coming. You've got a really interesting story, and you've got a lot of cool things you're working on for the industry. So I want to share some of those and kind of dive right into kind of your background and how you ended up in freight and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure, man. I guess, I ended up in freight as a kid, man, just being a kid that's just been obsessed with trucks all his life. I remember when I was a little kid, I used to have the little Matchbox toy sets where, just one here and here, and our dining room tables would turn into the interstate and receiving docks. And by the time I was age 11 years old, my uncle got me behind the wheel of a tractor trailer, and then I moved it about 100 yards, and it's just been always a passion of mine. It's always been
addicting ever since. Yeah,
it's been addicted ever since, and I knew early on that that's where I was going to end up, man, one way or the other.
That's really cool. So, how did you after? Did you go to college or anything like that? How did you end up in the freight and logistics industry?
So I went to college. I went to college. I started off, right out of senior in high school. Went to Johnson C. Smith University here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And one of the interesting things was when I was in school, I guess you said I didn't fit in, and I'm gonna say why I didn't fit in, because everybody around you, all your friends and things like that, they had their aspirations to be lawyers and doctors, and they had true career direction on where they were going. And I'm thinking to myself, I want to be around trucks, man. Because back then, man, that was 98, 99, man. Trucking wasn't cool. It wasn't at the forefront. It was one of those boring things that nobody was interested in back at that time. And the obsession for trucking has changed, quite tremendously over the time. But that's where it started for me. Got my CDL when I was 21 years old. I left college due to a family experience. I had to leave college when I was a sophomore, and had to do something. And I decided to get my CDL at that time, man. And I hit the open road at that point, man. And the rest is history.
That's awesome. So how long did you drive for?
So I drove 1 million miles. I've
been in. Congratulations.
That's awesome. Safe miles. And again, I started driving when I was, it was the year 2000. When I started, man, and I've been behind the wheel for quite some time.
That's awesome, man. That's really interesting. I've met several safe 1 million mile drivers, and it's always a massive kudos, because a lot of drivers fizzle out of the industry before they ever hit that point, right? It's a pretty big milestone to hit that, and I think that's really interesting. So I know you've always wanted to be around trucks and around the industry, but did you always know you were going to be an entrepreneur, or when did you have kind of that aha moment?
I would be lying to say I always knew I would be where I am today, but I always knew that I wanted to own a trucking company. So when I was a kid, I wanted to own a trucking company, and my aspiration was to own 100 trucks. I remember that being my goal. So I had in my mind that I wanted to own a business, but I never would have imagined that it would evolve into to what we do today. But the entrepreneurial journey is one of those things that I guess few are chosen to do. It's definitely one of those ones that it's not something that you would consider fun and easy at all times. But
Right.
I knew when I was younger, man. I knew I was going to do something with trucking. I knew I wanted to own my own trucking company. I just didn't know what it would end up being.
Yeah, and I think that that's a lot of what entrepreneurs like they feel, right, from a very young age, or even in their like middle teens or early 20s. They always kind of like have that, like, I know I'm going to do something, but I'm not sure what that is. And you kind of knew early on, like, I'm going to do this in trucking. Like, I want to do this. This is what my passion is. I think that's really awesome. Like, not everyone at like such a young age like follows their passion from 11 years old to today, right? Like, it's not, a lot of people say, oh, I want to be, I remember when I was 11, it went from like I wanted to be a dentist to when I was like 10, I wanted to be a trash man. When I was like 9, I wanted to be a fireman. So it was like, it always kind of like shifted and changed, but you knew right off the bat, I want to be in trucking. And that always kind of stuck with you. And here you are today in 2023, and you're still in the industry. I think that's really, really interesting.
Man, it doesn't go without struggles, and it doesn't go without the ups and downs. And even when I was a driver and an owner operator, man, I didn't think that I would be able to endure as long, because you're still
Right.
human. You're human. You have those human facets behind you. There are times when it was really, really rough. When I look back in 2007 and 2008, folks thinks that it's rough now, and we've never seen that before. But man,
Yeah.
if you were around the industry during those times, man, it was much like this, much like this. And and then when you go through those things, I think it provides you with a different level of skin when it comes down to being an entrepreneur. But I
Definitely.
knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know if that I would be able to stick it out as long as I have. But I'm so glad that I did, man. And I wouldn't trade the industry in for the world. There's a lot of things that could be done better. There's a lot of things that could
Definitely.
be worse as well. But I'm definitely passionate about this industry, and passionate about helping people, making sure that they're successful in this industry as well. That's where my true passion lies.
Have you ever left the industry? I know you said like there's always those human factors, but have you ever left and
Never,
just said I'm done?
never,
Never.
never,
Yeah.
never. But I tell you what, there's been times where you're in it, and you quit like 1,000 times a day. But then
Oh
it's
yeah,
almost like,
absolutely.
it's almost like playing golf, man. If you suck at golf, you know what I'm talking about, because I suck at golf too. But all it takes is
Yeah.
that one shot that just like goes right down the
Yep.
fairway and lands like three feet away from the hole, and you're like, you know what? I ain't so bad at this. I'm gonna stick around to it. But that's kind of how the journey's always been, man. It's been 1,000 times in my mind I get pissed off and say, you know what? I need
Absolutely.
to do something different. But then you always go back to the reason why you got into the industry, and you go back to what your true purpose is. And I think a lot of times,
I
from an
agree.
entrepreneurship standpoint, and a lot of people forget about, they don't associate trucking with true business ownership. And a lot of people forget, man, there's ups and downs with anything that you start. It's just,
Definitely.
it's always going to have that. And, of course, we're going to have those days where we're going to say, hey, you know what, the hell with this. I'm going to do something different. But at the end of the day, man, you just gotta deal with it, and you'll be okay tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that you summed it up perfectly. Like you can quit 1,000 times in your mind, but you always come back to it because it's what you really love and what you're interested in. Like I remember when I first started as a freight broker, like just tying it all in. Like I was at TQL, like, and for the first year, like my first 6 months, it was interesting, and then once it like really hit me, and I was on my own. I really started to dislike it a bit because of the processes that they had established. But I knew if I stuck it out and I could establish myself, like I would quit every day. Like I would quit in the morning, quit in the afternoon, but I'd go for a walk. I'd walk around the building because it was a city block in downtown Chicago. So I could take a 15-minute walk and be like, okay, I'm good. Let's go take it. Let's go back in and reevaluate. But it was interesting that like how it's just kind of how you always look at, I think it's how you look at the market and how you look at the industry too, right? If you have a perspective of like the how TQL operates is how all brokerages are, or how the whole industry is. And that was kind of how I perceived it for a while. And that's why I was so frustrated. But once I got out of that, I was like, oh, this is actually not how the whole industry operates. It's actually much different. And then I started to also realize there's a lot more out there than just being a freight broker or being a truck driver. Like you can also work on the docks. You can also be a forklift driver. You can also, be a logistics manager. You can be in procurement. You can work on the rate side. There's so many different jobs and positions in logistics. Like if you get bored of one thing, you can stay in the industry and kind of shift your focus to, hey, I was doing full truckload, but now I want to focus on LTL or intermodal or rail. It's just, there's so much that encompasses it. And I think that's definitely what keeps me so interested and so involved, because there's never really like a dull moment, even if the industry's up or down, right? Like you can say, oh, the industry's awful right now, but there's always something going on. There's always headlines, good or bad. There's always something happening.
So, even with that, and I definitely can agree with that. My biggest thing about that too is that as a business owner, you got to be in business to do one thing, regardless of what industry you're in or what state you want to consider it in. And I'm going to talk about the state here in a second.
Yeah,
but
please.
Your job as a business owner is to solve a problem. That's it.
Yeah.
So a business owner, just 100%, your only job as a business owner is to solve a problem, right? The reason why barbershops are there is so you can look fresh when you go outside, right? The reason why restaurants are in place because people are hungry. The reason why there are home builders out there is because people need homes built. So there's every business that you have, you're solving a problem, right? So when you think about the industry itself and you think about all of the problems that are there, it's an opportunity for you to create a business and solve that particular problem, whatever that may be, whether it be, hey, maybe we have compliance issues, maybe there's educational issues, whatever that issue is, be that solution to the problem. And I think that one of the things too, Thomas, that I definitely want to hit on too is the state of the industry, right? It's
absolutely.
So like right now, and what I will tell you is that data and headlines can be a gift and a curse, right? Because like you said, when you were at TQL, all you knew was in those walls, and that was trucking. That was the industry too. It's 100% blinders. But when you create your business and you create the dynamics of your business and you understand the ebbs and flows to it, if you focus on what the negatives are and you focus on the things that are happening, then you become that, right? So absolutely, when I look at the industry itself, the position that we're in from an industry perspective now, a lot of it is because we're able to see data more now than we have in the past, right? So those times back in like the 07s and the 04s, those times we didn't have all of this comparative data to say, okay, well, this is terrible, this is good, this is bad. There was no measuring stick. You just kind of just went through it and kind of felt it along the way. I think that with that, you have perception, you have people perceiving data, and everybody's going to have an opinion about it. But at the end of the day, your business, you should predicate your business based on your own facts, your own ecosystem, your own environment, and build your business around that environment. You made a great point a few minutes ago. You're like, hey, you know what? If I don't want to focus on truckload, then guess what? Maybe I can go ahead and check out the LTL side. Well, okay, well, cool. You do the same thing when you're in freight. Like, hey, maybe truckload asset is not the way to go right now. Maybe it's slowing down. Right. Maybe I pick up something else from my business perspective that is a little bit more consistent. Maybe I take a look into a different area of the business that's struggling. There's a problem that doesn't have the solutions out there. It's so many smart folks out in freight, man. It's some just brilliant people out in freight. And when I think about what happened with the convoys and the surges, there's so many brilliant people that are out there that can just really just kind of really just call to action to really be able to support the industry in a different way, because there are so many problems within the industry. There's opportunity for solutions, and maybe that's not necessarily bumping a dog.
You said something very interesting, and it was on the lines of like basically knowing or not listening to some of the outside noise, right? Like looking at the information and digesting it yourself. How important is it? And this is something I hear a lot in these bear markets, is say no to cheap freight. Cheap freight, don't haul cheap freight. Mm-hmm. But my opinion has always been, and I think your opinion is the same based, I listen to a lot of podcasts you've been on, and I think you're of the same mindset, is that cheap freight to me and cheap freight to Adam are very different things, right? Mm-hmm. My numbers could be very different. I could be rocking a 2002 truck with no payment, no trailer payment. Mm-hmm. My insurance is low because I've had no issues and I've been in the industry a long time. But Adam might have a 2022 truck that he bought at the top of the market, trailers he bought at the top of the market, and you may need to $3 a mile to break even, where I can be at $1.87. So it just that's something that I just don't. I see everywhere on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I'll be honest, and I'll be very fair to everyone. I get on some of these social media platforms, and I like to stir the pot and scream at the top of my lungs, say no to cheap freight. But I also like the conversations that come from that, and that's why I do some of those things. But how do you feel about cheap freight, and how can you kind of like eliminate some of that noise and look at the data and your numbers to evaluate what cheap freight is to you?
First of all, you should mind your damn business anyway. You need to focus on your own business and what goes on with that. So that's the first part of that. The second part of that is
Absolutely.
cheap freight is relative, and to me, if you look at pre-pandemic, right, let's go back to
Mm,
2019, 2020, and it's hard to believe it's been 3-4 years almost that we've been in this pandemic state. But if you
yeah.
remember that and you go back to your research, ATRI did their own research, which they do some good research in a broad scope. But if you look at the break even points back then, we're about $1.65. We were seeing break even points at $1.65, $1.70, right? So if I'm
Yeah.
operating at $1.65, I bought a truck back in 2015, 2016. And like you said, I don't have I don't have the truck notes. I don't have those large overheads that a lot of folks experienced in the last couple of years, which were reflective of the
Yeah.
inflationary tactics that were taking place during the pandemic. My numbers and your numbers are totally different, right? So if my break even point,
Yeah.
Thomas, is $1.65 and yours is 241, right? And you're looking at the National Transportation Index right now, and if your break even point is higher than that, then you're in trouble. But me, I'm not, because I'm sitting at $1.65. If I take a load that's $1.90 and my break even point's $1.65, I'm almost making 20% profit on the load. So are you
Yeah.
mad at me? Are you mad at me because I'm making 20% on $1.90 load and you're not? Is that the way it's supposed to work? I get it. I understand it. I understand the
Yeah.
whole cheap freight thing, right? And when they say don't haul cheap freight, it's all, I think part of that too is that you have to understand the dynamics of supply and demand, right? So if you're sitting,
Definitely.
if you're going inbound to South Florida, you can't just say, okay, hey, let's just shut the trucks down and say we're not going to haul cheap freight out of Florida. Well, it's
You'll
just a
never get out
fallacy.
of Florida.
You'll never get out of that from that point, because the amount of inbound trucks that are going in there versus the outbound freight, it's just not there. And once you understand the dynamics of it, I think that could be a big piece. And I'm a big believer in a fair society, right? Because when you start
Yeah.
regulating things and you start putting regulations in place, then we don't have that free economical leverage and wiggle room as entrepreneurs to be able to make those decisions, be able to go back and forth with that. So when it comes down to cheap freight, I think you have to understand what that means. Cheap freight to you and cheap freight to me would be two different things, because we don't have the same business metrics that we're relying on. So, but I understand, you got to have something to, to scream at the top of your lungs at the top of the hill. But, at the end of the day, man, cheap freight is
Yeah.
relative to the person. And I don't think it's something that could be kind of generic, because everybody's business is different.
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of people like I look at every like I don't talk a lot on Facebook or anything because I'm just not on it very often. But when I am, I see a lot of people saying, "Hey, I just hauled, $1.15 out of Florida," which in this market is really good at this time of the year. It's not great, but obviously getting
Right.
out of Florida and getting into Georgia or getting somewhere else, you're
Right.
getting out of a really terrible market and getting into better markets. And people pile on to people who say that, and they're like, hey, you're part of the problem, you're part of this, part of that. But at the same time, like if you're a carrier who's already really struggling, you can't afford to necessarily like literally deadhead from Miami to Savannah or to Atlanta, where if you can take something that at least potentially covers your fuel to get you to a better
Absolutely.
market, you've got to be able to look and take those evaluations and make those calculated risks for your business, because everyone, like you said, people need to mind their own business. But I think that also comes from people oversharing on social media, right? Like I don't like sometimes I think that people want to validate if they do the right things, and they need that validation of saying, hey, like tell me I did good, because they just don't know, or they want that peer approval. But at the same time, it's like you don't need to share. Like if you know your numbers and you know what your business is doing, why share that on social media anyway to begin with? Just go about your business and move on, right?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, like you said, like it really boils down to just minding your business. I think that
Yeah,
you got to forget, you got to not forget, but you got to remember and not forget that you got the CEO title on your shirt. Am I going to spend more of
yeah,
my time saying, hey, doing a campaign on saying no to cheap freight, or I'm going to invest that same time in finding my own customers? Am I going to do
yeah,
my due diligence to lower my expenses? Am I going to break down my variables and my fixed costs and see at what point, at what line item I can reduce? Those are the things that, as a business owner, that you have to focus your time on. And I'm just not I've never been a narrative guy, Thomas, because I'm gonna tell you why. Because
yeah. Please.
my business problems are not your problems. The decisions
Mm,
that I made when I started my business have nothing to do with you, right? And what I mean by
right.
that is that what the choices that I made to be a business owner and the risks that I took and associated with those, they have nothing to do with you. They have nothing to do
But
with.
Adam, But Adam, you can't see the correlation between the one load that you took at $1.14 a mile and the fact that now I'm going to get so much less in the market because that
Man,
one truck took it. Come
that
on.
has nothing to do with the market or anything. And I'm not and
I agree.
misery, obviously misery
It
loves
loves
company.
company.
It
Yeah.
does. It does. And I'm one of the things that you'll know about me, I'm right down the middle, man. I am not a
Yeah.
narrative person. I'm gonna shoot it to you straight. You gonna like it or you're not gonna like it. I've been a
Exactly.
carrier. You know what I'm saying? I've been on that side. I'm on the carrier support side. My company is founded on the carrier support side, but that doesn't mean that we're without fault. That doesn't mean there's
Yeah.
without opportunity and opportunity to get better and to learn more. And I just, from my perspective, if I do choose to start any business, right, that'd be the same thing if I decided to start, a chicken sandwich business 2 doors down from a Chick-fil-A, and I blame the customers at Chick-fil-A for eating there. Like, it's
Right.
we're not supporting small businesses. Like, you got to
Right.
understand your competition. You got to understand what you're doing. And the crazy thing about it is that, man, when you go down and you look at a lot of from each side, from both sides, and I hate that it's still a cat and mouse two-sided game. The brokers and the
Yeah.
carriers. But the crazy thing that I don't ever see, and I go from conference to conference, man. I've been to just about every conference that you can speak on. But you know what? The thing that I never see, I never
What's
see a
that?
I never see a big carrier presence at a broker
Mm,
conference, and I never see a big broker conference at a carrier facing conference.
I
Right?
agree.
I won't say the names, so we'll leave that out. But you'll
Yeah.
never see that. You'll never see that. You'll never
I've
see that.
I've found that very interesting as well. I've been to a few. I started to attend more conferences when I was with Freight Waves, and then even more so since I started Think Freight. And we've been to a few this year, and I've noticed the exact same thing. I've been to two on the trucking only side, two on the broker side. Um, I've noticed the exact same thing. It's been all brokers, maybe a few very small carriers that are like trying to get their name. But aside from that, you don't have a big broker presence at carrier or at carrier events. You don't have a big broker or carrier presence at broker events. And I think it's very interesting that there is still that huge disconnect between the two. There are plenty of brokers and carriers that work very well hand in hand, but at
Absolutely.
large, the market is very disconnected between the two. I've never understood that because as someone who's works primarily in brokerage, I need carriers. I cannot do a damn thing without carriers. So when I was when I've been at brokerages and people and when other brokers treat carriers improperly, it's just like, why are you why are you spitting in the face of the people that move your freight? Like, it
100%.
just it never makes sense. And yeah, there's other carriers out there, but if you've got a good carrier that knows what they're doing, can move your freight effectively on time, it's very difficult to get your freight to move from point A to point B efficiently, effectively and on time. Right. Like, so it's for brokers to just mistreat carriers in that way. It's always been a very interesting dynamic in my eye.
But I think too, man, it goes both ways, right?
Absolutely.
Because here's the thing, as a broker, and one of the things that I understand is that, Thomas, if you sign me up as a carrier and I'm pulling your freight on the first time, you don't know me. We don't know anything about each
Yeah.
other. You're taking a calculated risk on me. I'm taking a calculated risk on you. And the thing
Yep.
that from that standpoint, I hire you as a broker for a service. And the reason why
Hmm.
I hire you for a service is because I can't get it myself. I can't find the freight myself, or I can't consistently be able to compete to get freight for myself. So I partner
Yeah.
with a broker, though I can do that. But the intricacies behind that closed curtain, and you've worked with TQL as an agent, and I know the whole model. I know, hey,
Yeah.
you worked off a draw in the first probably 6 months, and you had to eat what you kill, and the amount of cold calls that you
Yeah.
made a day, and the amount of cold calls that you had to make a week just to land that one shipper, and as much that and to do that, then you put a carrier that you're really not sure on. You're reaching out to Adam, and you're like,
Yeah.
I hope this guy doesn't screw up my relationship. And I've been working on my month in order to land this customer. It goes both ways. It's a trust issue.
Absolutely.
From a transparency
I
standpoint, I
agree.
think it's more of a trust issue and a knowledge based issue. Because if they really saw the inside, right? If carriers really saw what it's like on the inside, and if brokers really saw what it was like when a carrier goes to and they pull up to one of your shippers and they're treated the way that they're treated, or we go up to a shipper
I
and you give us the wrong address, or you give it to the shipper
Yep.
and the load's supposed to weigh 30,000, now it's 42,000 pounds. So like for both sides, man, both sides, it's just always been just instead of a singular approach to fix a very simple problem, we have one of the easiest problems to solve in the American economy. We pick up and we deliver. That's it. We
Yeah.
overcomplicate it with just about everything. We overcomplicate it with metrics. We overcomplicate it with big words. We have a very simple task. We take care of customer A, who's shipping product, to customer B, who's receiving product. We're the intermediaries
Yeah.
that are responsible for doing that. But we overcomplicate it. We overcomplicate it with just about everything you can imagine. And it's just from what I see, the industry where it was when I got into it, like almost 24 years ago, and I see now, and I'm sorry about the light, and I see
No,
it
you're
now.
good.
When I see it now, the needle hasn't been moved very much. It hasn't
Yeah.
been moved much at all. Quite frankly, we've made some advancements in tech, and we made some advancements on just from a communication side. But some of the same things that plagued then still plague now.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. You touched on something very interesting, and it's how brokers need to be able to see the trucker side. Truckers need to be able to see the broker side. How do you think that we can build those kind of um, relationships around trust? Right. You mentioned that word trust. People, they don't trust each other. How can we build a better network of trust among carriers and brokers? Obviously, it's tough when you've never hauled with someone before. But how can we build a better relationship of a network of trust, but also um, be able to take that and be able to utilize those relationships, Adam, with with us with the shipper network, right? Like how can we all how can everyone play nice, and how do you think that we can better show carriers the broker side and carriers the brokers the carrier side, carriers the broker side?
Man, that's tough, man. That's so tough with breaking the walls down first. It's almost like there's got to be a broken ice before we even can get there. Because
Mm,
right now, with social media, makes things better and it makes things worse. And I
yeah.
think for the industry itself, I think it's made it a little worse. Just from a relationship and trust standpoint, where we're seeing people sharing the rate cons, saying, "Hey, look at this broker
Mm,
here. He's trying to get me to go here with this for that." And I think it's tough, man. I think it's tough. I think some of it comes from the top down. And when I mean the top down, when you look at your top brokerages, your TQLs, your CH Robinsons, because honestly, one of the things that used to really get under my skin is that you get on the phone with a broker, and it's just the attitude, the entitlement,
mm,
the way that they approach the telephone call, like this carrier that has the ability to move 45,000 pounds of freight for you is not somebody that you should be able to buy into and really, really show a better relationship approach. But man, some of the times you get on the phone with some of these brokers, man, it makes you want to jump through the phone. Some of
yeah.
but it's all culture though. So when you talk about that, it's
100%.
it's culture. So it's culture
Yeah.
from the top down. And when you and I get it. TQL, for example, high pressure type. It's a major situation, man. If you don't create a culture where your carrier is just as much as your customer is your customer is your customer, then that it always will be the case. And for me, and even on a broker standpoint, if I got a carrier that goes to a shipper, right, and they go to one of my customers per se, and
Hmm.
my customer is not allowing them to use the bathrooms or not allowing them to be able to park or things like that, then that leaves me no other choice but to put some things to the side and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to move on. Maybe I need to move
Yeah.
forward. Maybe I need to find a different customer because I cannot ruin the relationship I have with my carrier because my carrier is just as important. But a lot of times it goes backwards, and a lot of carriers are going to feel that. At the end of the day, it's always going to be their customer first. And I think it's
Yeah.
a long road, man. It's a long road, and I think the start of it was just like some of the barriers got to come down. Some of the back and forth has got to stop. I think some of the things that are expected, some of the expectations need to be lowered.
Yeah.
And specifically, things like transparency and things like that. I don't think that needs to be the focus when transparency. When I look at transparency, let's both sit at a table and let's talk about hey, list out these things that we could do better. But I just think that it's a long road, man. And I think that the
Yeah.
gap, the actual gap in itself just widens and widens and widens. And until we have, top down type approach from the executives at the larger firms, where when the larger firms learn how to treat their carriers better and be better partners with the carriers, to where it becomes more of a cultural thing. Because now I was looking at a statistic the other day, the amount of new brokerages that started since 2019,
I saw that.
47% more, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of them, if you think about it, Thomas, if they're spinoffs from the larger brokers and the culture that was provided, then that's all they know. All they know is this is to act a certain way. I think that
Yeah.
it's going to continuously become an issue until both sides can sit down at a table, both sides can be in the same room and be able to have organic, real conversations on what we could do together. I think that on the carrier side, they want transparency, but I think from a transparency perspective, on the carrier side, they want better rates and better transparency. I think they got to understand what goes into the RFQs and what goes into being able to actually quote a customer, what goes into the overall margin dynamics. And I think that once they
Yeah.
understand that, and once if there was any more transparency, once they understand that, then I think we could start from that perspective. But it's a lot, man. It's a lot. It's a lot to go.
It definitely is, and I think that one thing we'll touch on just real quick, and then I've got a couple other things I want to get to about what you're doing. But I think that a lot of brokers and carriers, I think it's a two-way street. They look at the broker carrier relationship as just a very transactional relationship. I'm going to get
100%.
one load from this broker, and that's it. And I was always of the mindset, Adam, I'm going to try to keep this carrier moving as much as possible, especially if they did a really good job. If they were someone that was very good with communication or whatever my customer needed, there was plenty of times where I had freight that did not matter at all if it was 3 days late. The customer didn't like it was wide open receiving for 3 or 4 days. So that kind of stuff, it just didn't matter. But like there was plenty of times where there was very sensitive, must have high levels of communication. If those carriers did a very good job, I wanted to keep them in the network, keep them moving, keep them, especially with that customer's freight. So I would always tell them, hey, let me know when you're going to be back in the area or when or what areas you service or how we can work together, because I didn't want to lose a good partner, right?
Sure.
It's you said it earlier, you have to look at your carrier relationships just as important as your customer relationships, because if you have
Absolutely.
customers but you don't have trucks to move them, you don't have those good partners to move them on, it does you no good.
That's right. That's right.
So next, I want to touch on something, Adam, that I think is really, really interesting. It's what you're doing with ILG, with Innovative Logistics Group. So what is Innovative Logistics Group, and what are you guys focusing on? You've also started university. So what is that? And let's dive into that a little bit.
So ILG is 100% carrier focused. We're a carrier
Mm,
focused, carrier centric services center to where we're providing solutions for small carriers in a variety of different ways, whether it be compliance, whether it be education, whether it be resources. I kind of look at us as the targets of the industry, where you can come into the ecosystem. You may need this, and you can find yourself being able to satisfy every need within your company, whether it's, hey, I need factoring, I need this, I need whatever it may need. We have a full ecosystem. But my passion and what I really, really wanted to always get into was applying the academia side to the industry.
Mm.
The amount of folks that are in the industry now, as opposed to before, obviously has increased. But that also has increased the amount of folks that are having the painful heartaches of having to lose everything
Mm.
from that.
Yes.
And what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a university. And honestly, the goal is to one day make it brick and mortar. But we created a full suite of educational cohorts for every single topic that you can imagine within the industry.
Mm. I love that.
We've got a course on better freight rate negotiations to teach you on how to negotiate rates better. We got courses on how to build and establish better relationships, how to source your green mile, how to focus on direct shippers, anything that you can imagine for starting a trucking company or sustaining a trucking company. We created that. We provide mentorship. We provide one-on-one mentorship where we can actually hand walk you through the whole process and help you evaluate your business. Because at the end of the day, my passion is people. At the end of the day,
I love that.
I come from, one of the things that I do for my civic duty and giving back is I'm also a coach. So, I coach sports. And one of the things that I'm just so passionate about is I'm so passionate about people development. Whether it's entrepreneurial development, whether it's skill development, or whether it's just personal development, I'm just big on that, man. I'm just big on seeing the progression of people. And what inspires me more than anything is seeing the progression of an owner operator in this industry that started off with one truck and was operating at this level, and now he's a fleet owner sitting in his office, running point with 9 and 10 trucks, kind of doing what they need to do. And, it's almost like what you said earlier, Tom. It's like, the industry itself. And if you look at it from a general perspective, I'm going to say something that pissed me off the other day, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I was at a conference / meeting, and someone said, hey, any carrier that started a trucking company in the last 2 years, I'm not going to do business with them, because if they started a business over the last 2 years, there's something that's not right about them. They're potential fraud. And things like that, man, when I see that type of narrative, it just tells me that because of the generic message and the general message, there are people out here who, like I said, who've made great business decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who have the capital available, who want to start during this period, because by the time, 2024, 25 rolls around, they have 2 years in the business and they really be able to move and do other things. Everybody ain't the same. Everybody don't have the same outcome. So we started the university to provide resources and support for anybody that is a small carrier and a fleet owner that wants to improve, wants to work on a certain particular thing, wants to get better, wants to potentially have a long-term vision of becoming whatever they want to become in the industry. We want to just create that. We want to be a dream builder. And that's one of the things that we wanted to do. I love this industry, and I want to make sure that I provide our owner operators and our small fleet owners the ability to be successful. 95% of this country is moved by owner operators and small fleet owners, not by mega carriers. So where's the support for those guys, right? Where's the support for them? Where
doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. And what exists, however, is narratives being pushed that, hey, we need to focus on this. Focus on the brokers. Nah, I need to focus on you and your business. Let's focus on getting that in order. Let's focus on making the right decisions within your own ecosystem. And it just again, I'm not the type of guy, man. I don't hold punches. I don't really care about narratives, man. I don't get into that stuff. I'm really focused on what you can do to master yourself, master your business. And we created a support system that for folks that want to master their businesses, we got a place for you.
I love that, man. I love that you're giving back so much to what you love and to the industry you love, and fixing and trying to fill a hole, fix something that's really missing, and that's education within the industry. Because I think that, whether it's, what you guys are doing on the carrier side or even on the broker side, and I think even a lot of times with logistics managers and shipping managers, there's not a lot of education around the industry and how and how it operates and how and best procedures, just things like that. Like obviously procedures change with company to company, but just the overall industry and how things interact and how things go, and giving that support and that commitment. I absolutely love that, and I think that more companies and more just industry executives need to take a real focus at training and really educating their people, because I think that's I was talking with Charlie Shafro the other day, and it was we talked about building culture and building and retaining people, and those are some of the things that you have to do, is just invest in your people, and those are very important aspects of just being a business owner, is investing in those people.
100%, man. It's people over profits, man. And you got to understand that
Yeah.
relationships are the currency, and building relationships will take you so far. I was telling, we had a master class the other night that I was doing. And one of the stories that came out is, I'll never forget, man. I created a relationship with a broker, way back when I was, when I was operating my fleet. And
Yeah.
our relationship became so strong because, number one, it was based on trust. He understood what I needed, and at the end of the day, he made sure that we were taken care of. And then, when there were
Mm.
lean times, he was transparent. When there were not lean times, I was flexible. But we became so close that, man, he invited me to his wedding. And it's the things like that. But when you think
That's
about those
great.
kind of relationships, though, man, at the end of the day, at the that's the one thing that I want people to realize, is that when you pick up the phone and you call a broker, man, that's a person. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, I'm calling Thomas. Thomas, you're not a broker. You Thomas. At the end
Yep.
of the day, you Thomas. And people are going to give you what they get. And at the end of the day,
Definitely.
you get on the phone and you talk like you got, you guys can get at this on the same page. Then we give you what you get. And then and what I see a lot of times is, man, like you said, everything's so transactional. You get on the phone, I called you on the load, Thomas. I don't even ask you how you doing. I don't even say hi. Hey, load
Yeah.
that you got posted, blah blah X to X. What's the details on it? Like, come on, man. Like, let's start with some
Right.
etiquette. Let's that's part of it. That's part of it.
Yeah.
Is that's part of my passion, is that a lot of these things are things that we can look inside. And it's so funny, man. And it just hit my heart the other day, man. I was sitting down. We were out, and I was sitting at a cigar lounge in Atlanta, and a song came on, and it just, like, I was like, wow. And it hadn't hit that hard in a long time, but the song was "Man in the Mirror" by Michael Jackson.
Oh yeah.
And just, if it just kind of, just, if you look at where we are as a society, as a trucking world, as a trucking industry, and really, if you want to look at it as a world and as a culture of
Mm.
people, man, a lot of people forgot about the fact that, sometimes, you forget that everything starts with the person that you're staring at in the mirror every day. And
I
in
fully
the
agree.
industry itself, like, you want to sit there and point all the fingers and you want to say that these are all the problems. When you stand in that mirror, what did you do today to improve? What did you do today to be a better person? What did you do today to make better relationships? And it starts with the man in the mirror, man. And I never, I'm a huge Mike fan, and I never thought of it in that light. But that day it just hit me, man. It's like, man, that's what it is.
It is, man. I love that. And let's touch on something just a little bit lighter as we get into the end of the show here. So you mentioned you're a coach. What sport do you coach?
So I've coached basketball. I coach soccer. The ages with the soccer part, though, is where I got all of my patience from. So
Oh wow, I bet.
my youngest daughter, she was in soccer when she was a real young child. So I was doing 6 and under soccer. So if
Oh
you
my
can
gosh.
imagine the level of patience and the level of just overall,
Ooh.
just being but you know what it taught me, though, man, is I'll never forget, man. We had such an amazing six and under soccer team, because the first day that they came out there, man, it was like herding cats. That's all it was. But to watch them be able to run plays and execute during matches and watching development, man,
That's awesome.
I've been able to make decisions in life as a business owner that, that obviously that I've been able to live a certain way. And I tell people that, for me, satisfaction is not in money. Satisfaction is in development and watching people that
Mm.
has taken something that fell on their ear from my lips and been able to transition that into success. man, you can't put a dollar sign on that. You can't put a dollar sign on development and watching somebody really grow and being able to move into place. So, yeah, man, that's where I guess that's where the foundation of coaching principles come from.
That's awesome. I love that. Let me ask you one more quick question before we let you off. So if you were starting a sports league today, what sports league would you want to start in?
Football, man.
Football?
Absolutely.
What's your favorite team?
Carolina Panthers all day long, man. All day long.
So now I've got you opened the can of worms.
Don't say it this weekend. Oh my God. You got
it. So, and number one, I'm just going to say it. Carolina owes Chicago Bears a pick this year.
We do.
It's a first round pick.
Yeah.
And Carolina is not doing very well this year. I will take that number one pick. We will look back on this in probably the end of the year, and I will probably have ruined the fact that the Bears would have gotten the number one pick. They're probably going to end up with like 15 now. Carolina's going to go on a great run. I'm just honestly kidding. You guys are going to go on a great run. I mean, honestly, I just like good football. I'm a diehard Bears fan, but I know where we are as a team. I'm sure you know where you guys are as a team. I'm looking for good development on the side of the ball. Like kind of like what you said. Every game, I just look for that development from my team, and it's like I look at every other game, and I'm like, let's just have fun. Go teams. Go NFL. Yeah. Let's have some fun.
Same way, man. And at the end of the day, man, it's as a fan, as a business owner, you're going to experience the same highs and lows, man. And even as a fan, man, what are you going to jump ship? Because you go on a 6 or 7 game losing streak. As a business owner, what I'm going to jump ship because I go on a 7-week losing streak? No, you're looking for the things that you just talked about. You talked about development, and you, as a business owner, sometimes you got to look at the silver lining and be able to use it as a building block to build off of that and say, you know what, we're headed in the right direction, right? We're headed in the right direction. We may not be there. But you know what? I made this adjustment here and I've seen milestones of improvement. And a lot of time we measure our success based on just the finish line as opposed to giving ourselves credit for hitting those milestone targets. And that's the thing that I will say about my Carolina Panthers team and about just in general, just about being a fan and being a business owner is pretty much the same wave that you ride. It's just you just got to ride the wave out, man.
It is, man. You're completely right. You may have those days, those games where you quit your fandom for 10 minutes and you're just like, I'm done with this team. I'm done. Same thing with business. You might be done for 10 or 15 minutes, but you calm down. You're like, all right, let's get back to it. Like it is what it is, right? Absolutely. Like you don't throw away your fandom for those 10 minutes or that one bad game or 10 bad games, whatever it is. It's going to bounce back eventually, and you just got to look in the mirror, like we got back to, look in the man in the mirror and how you can improve and taking those small wins every day. 100. Adam, I appreciate you coming on today and spending some time with the audience and sharing your story and just talking about some really, really interesting topics that don't always get talked about. Where can everyone find you? Where can people find ILG and what you guys are doing?
You can find us at www.innovativelegisticsgroup.io. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm at Adam L. Wingfield. I'm on LinkedIn at Adam L. Wingfield. You can follow us on Instagram at Innovative Logistics University. You can follow us on Facebook at Innovative Logistics University. Feel free to reach out at any time, and we'll be love to be there to be your support pillars.
Awesome. You guys all know links will be down in the comments or in the description. That way you can find Adam and what he's doing at ILG. If you guys like today's podcast, give it a like and review. It helps us out tremendously. And we do drop newsletters on Monday and Wednesday, ThinkFreight.io. And thanks again for tuning in. Have a good one. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. I appreciate it.